people. Great, so I shall start again. Big City Butterflies. Hello, my name's Steve from Butterfly Conservation. Welcome to Big City Butterflies Butterfly Identification and Recording Workshop. Yes, it's part of the Big City Butterflies project, which is a 4-year Heritage Lottery funded project that just got underway recently. So I'm going to give you a bit of just a quick introduction to butterfly conservation, who we are, a quick introduction to the project, and then we'll get into some of the different butterflies that you can see in London and how to record them. So yes, our Butterfly Conservation is a UK-wide charity. Our mission is the conservation of butterflies, moths and our environment. We take practical conservation action, so we've got over 70 landscape scale conservation projects looking to conserve butterflies and moths at a good landscape scale. We promote scientific study and publish a number of different scientific papers each year with our science department. We safeguard important sites, so we own and manage nature reserves, a small number of nature reserves across the country, primarily for working on butterfly habitats and promoting butterfly conservation. We encourage public enjoyment of butterflies and moths and run lots of different events. We have over 40,000 members, 80 members of staff, thousands of volunteers, and I'll come on to the different volunteer branches that are organised across the country because they run in different events in your area that may be of interest. And one great present, Sir David Attenborough there, promoting the Big Butterfly Count. So why care about butterflies and moths? Well, they have their own intrinsic value, and they should be worthy of conservation in their own right. They often have aesthetic value. They're beautiful insects and people enjoy looking at them. For educational reasons, students often learn about butterfly life cycles, for example, to learn about the natural world. And also they're important in terms of the ecosystem, providing a food source for many other different species, different wildlife, and important for pollination of crops and other plants. And actually they're a really useful indicator of the health of our environment. And for our own mental health, in terms of getting out there and enjoying seeing butterflies and recording butterflies. So a quick introduction about the project, Big City Butterflies, and it's really seeking to help Londoners discover and connect with butterflies, moths, and the green spaces that support them. So we'll be running lots of different events and activities across the project area. I'm the conservation officer, so I'm doing more of the conservation work and advice. And my colleague, Ele, is the engagement officer, and she'll be doing more of the community events and engagement. We'll be looking to improve the quality and connectivity of green spaces in London, working with different community groups and land managers to advise on habitat improvements, enhancements to support butterflies and moths. We are looking to increase the levels of recording and monitoring across London. So yes, ideally this is done with the help of local volunteers who on their local patch can do some regular butterfly surveying or monitoring, and that really helps us understand how butterflies are faring and if their numbers are increasing or decreasing. We want to engage with new and diverse audiences in London to reach out to underrepresented audiences in our membership. We want to enable butterfly conservation to develop and test new approaches to conservation in an urban context. So really looking to understand a bit more about urban habitats and their conservation, working with local groups to help in their conservation and understand how butterflies are faring in those habitats. So the project area covers 17 inner London boroughs that are shown in this slide, and those boroughs are are also divided into the 4 butterfly conservation branches. And those are volunteer-run branches that have a chair and a committee and run different events in those areas. So, as I said, this talk has been primarily publicised and promoted in the Brent borough. So hopefully we've got some locals in from that borough, and that borough is covered by the Herts and Middlesex and Northwest London branch. So they have their own website that you can go and find out more information on their activities. And we'll be working with them and with some of the local volunteers within that area. Within each borough, we've assigned a flagship site, which is good for butterflies, and you can go and see a few different butterfly species on that site, and also has good facilities maybe for running events. So within Brent, the one marked here, it's Friant's Country Park, a site with enormous amount of meadow areas that are sort of maintained and cut for hay, a fantastic site for different butterflies, which we'll come on to. So the project has 3 main themes. The first one is engagement. Principally, my colleague Ellie will be running lots of different events, including school workshops, bigger events and fairs, that kind of thing, and also smaller community events. Recording and monitoring, so a bit like this workshop, will be providing more information and training to help people do more recording and monitoring of butterflies and moths. And finally, habitat management. So that's my role as the conservation officer, to offer site advice visits to different land managers and community groups, to help enhance different sites for butterflies and moths. And also we have a budget for things like seeding and planting, shrub and tree planting as well. So just going to tell you a bit of an introduction about butterflies. A part of the insect order Lepidoptera, which means scaly wings, and you can see the scales that make up their wings and the different colours within their wings. There's 180,000 species globally. The majority are moths, but they all go through metamorphosis as part of their life cycle, so the egg, larva or caterpillar, pupa and adult. They feed on plants. The adults drink nectar for sugar, for energy, and the larvae or caterpillars feed on leaves. They supplement that with minerals from animal waste or even dead animals, or if you're the purple emperor butterfly, quite an elusive butterfly that enthusiasts love to see, that comes down from the treetops to feed on rancid shrimp paste or other noxious smelling things such as that, and that's used to kind of encourage them down and get a view of this fantastic butterfly. Just quickly about moths. So, well, we have 59 resident species of butterfly in the UK compared to 2,500 species of moths, and many of those are quite colourful, as you can see in some of the images on the screen there, and some of them fly in the daytime as well. But only 2 species eat your clothes, and they are important pollinators during the night time. And I mentioned some fly during the day, around 350. They're divided into two groups. So the micro group is less than 10 millimeters, and then the ones shown on your screen are all part of the macro, or the larger groups. And similarly with butterflies, some moths are responding to climate change. So, for example, the Jersey tiger, similar to the scarlet tiger shown here, is one that's actually spreading north and has sort of colonised London in the last 10 years or so. So some butterflies hibernate as adults, and they tend to be well camouflaged ones, like the brimstone on the left here, which is looks like a leaf underneath, and they will go right through the winter as an adult, so they'll need to feed up in the autumn time to get through the winter as an adult. And the comma on the right here is another butterfly that hibernates as an adult as well, camouflaged, as you can see on the underside. And the little white marking here is where it gets its name from in terms of the comma. So next. So yes, London has a really good variety and quantity of green spaces, different nature reserves, parks and gardens. So nearly 50% of London is green and blue. And those habitats provide a real haven for butterflies, particularly with the pressures in the wider countryside and more intensive farming, habitat loss. So these green spaces provide a real haven for butterflies. And actually they're bucking the trend in London with more butterflies, butterfly numbers increasing, and actually the number of different species is actually going up in London, which is good news. So as I mentioned, this is just a quick snapshot. We'll get some more images in a minute of butterflies of inner London. So back in the 1980s, there were around 20 or so species, and those are all shown in black text. But the ones highlighted in blue text are actually species that have colonized since that time, over the last 20 years or so. So that the brown argus, for example, is a butterfly similar to the common blue, and it's adapted its behaviour and feeds on different food plants, caterpillar food plants, and that's allowed it to expand its range. So it's the geranium species that it's now using more commonly, and that's allowed it to spread, like dove's foot cranesbill, for example, is one of the caterpillar food plants. And the marble white is another success story shown here in the picture, quite a striking butterfly that has colonised a lot of parks and green spaces in London with more sensitive grassland management and more meadow management, and encouraging different fine grasses, as that is what the caterpillars of the marble white feed on. So if you can provide the right kind of habitat, then this butterfly will colonise green spaces within London. So we'll come on to some of those butterflies in a bit more detail now. So the common blue shown here, the male is bright blue, shown here, whereas the female is more of a dull brown with flashes of blue. They lay eggs primarily on common bird's foot trefoil, but also a couple of other species that it's now using in London, in Burgess Park, for example, where in South London, where it's doing very well. It has 2 generations across the year, so you'll see adults flying in May, June, and also August and September. And it's looking at the underside, so when they are flying past, and the males in particular are quite easy to spot, but when there are other sort of similar butterflies, it's the underside that helps distinguish, and these have quite a distinctive sort of pattern on the underside that you can see here. And the holly blue is one that is similar, if you like, with the common blue, but it's a much paler blue that you can see on the underside, and just these simple black dots which differentiate it from the common blue. This is also more widespread in terms of being seen in parks and gardens, whereas the common blue is more of a meadow butterfly. This particular one has 2 generations per year. The first spring generation lay eggs on the buds of holly, whereas the summer generation lay eggs on ivy. Hence the name holly blue. So this is one that you can easily support if you have got a sort of woodland area or scrub area, then making sure there's some holly in there will help encourage this species. Females shown here have the darker wing edges, although they rarely open their wings, so it's this light colour on the underside that's the best thing to look out for with the holly blue. Small tortoiseshell is one that hibernates over winter, has these very distinctive colours. You can't really mistake it for anything else, with the orange and the yellow and black bands. It lays eggs on common nettle, so having some wilder areas, particularly sunny spots with nettle in, will help support this species. It loves basking in the sunshine on rocks and paths. Statuses are currently low priority, but there's been increased concern due to a rapid decline. So we'll come on to that a bit later, but there is a widespread decline with this species and a number of other species across the whole of the UK. The red admiral, another quite distinctive butterfly. This one has the red or orange bands and the white markings, and it's quite camouflaged underneath to help it overwinter. It also lays eggs on common nettle and is primarily a migratory species. So in spring, there are northward migrations from North Africa and continental Europe. Those immigrant females lay eggs, and then there's emergence of fresh butterflies from July onwards. And with climate change, this is one that is now becoming more resident and overwintering in this country. The peacock, quite a distinctive one you may be familiar with the classic eye spots on the wings. Another one that hibernates as an adult over winter and that lays eggs on common nettle. It's quite a widespread species, quite a strong flyer, and the caterpillars form webs, you can see here, in a very spiky. The meadow brown is very much brown in colour, with orange markings, particularly on the underside. As the name suggests, very much a sort of meadow species where you've got longer grasses, more open grassland, and the caterpillars feed on meadow grasses such as fescues and cocksfoot. And it's one of the most widespread species of butterfly in the UK, so often seen in people's gardens as well. The gatekeeper is one that you can be confused with the meadow brown, but it's smaller and has the white spots, particularly on the underside, that are more distinctive and has more orange markings, more orange on both the forewing and the hind wing. The adult loves to nectar on marjoram and bramble, and this particular one has one generation, so most often seen in July and August. The ringlet is one that's actually expanding north in the UK as a whole, but is also one that is colonising new sites within London where suitable habitat can be provided. It flies when most other butterflies are inactive. It doesn't mind the cold, and caterpillar feeds on many different grasses. Has one generation from July to August, and as I mentioned, it's been expanding its range in recent years. So this one appears much darker than the meadow brown, and as the name suggests, got these quite distinctive rings, particularly on the underside. So that's the thing to look out for if you're getting to know some of these species, to wait for it to land, perhaps have a camera with you, or even some binoculars with a close focus so you can have a good look or take a picture. The large skipper. This one is another species that tends to be found in tall grass areas. The caterpillar feeds on a grass called cocksfoot. Adults love feeding on bramble flowers, and they have this checkered pattern which helps distinguish it from the similar small skipper shown below. So you can see this doesn't have the checkered pattern. And the caterpillars of this particular one feed on a different grass called Yorkshire fog, and they both prefer open places with tall grasses. often confused with a moth because they have very erratic sort of flight, quite small and kind of hairy. But as with all butterflies, they have the clubbed antennae, which nearly all moths don't have. So that is one way of telling moths and butterflies apart. The purple hair streak is a canopy species, so it flies up high in the tree canopy, most often oak, as it lays its eggs on oak buds, and the adults' food source is aphid honeydew rather than nectar. So this one, yes, I think all the butterflies we've been through so far can be seen at Friant Country Park. This next one, white letter hair streak, is spreading in London, but it's not been recorded at Friant Country Park, I should say. Oh, and the thing to look out for with purple hair streak, it is one where you have to look up into mature oak trees, particularly in open sunny positions, and often in the evening. Actually, they can be better seen then. And it is this silvery underside that's quite distinctive with the purple hair streak. White letter hair streak is a bit more elusive, difficult to see. It's often up in the top of elm trees as it lays eggs on the elm trees. But the adults do sometimes come down to nectar on flowers and privet and bramble. As I said, it's increasing its range rapidly in London, where sites can be managed and elm can be encouraged, or we can plant disease-resistant elm because a lot of the elm trees have been suffering with Dutch elm disease, and that's caused a decline more widely. But for example, the Vauxhall Gardens in London, they planted some elm trees about 15 or so years ago, and that butterfly has now colonised, within a site in central London. But it is largely restricted to the south of the UK. So, in reality, as I said, some of these canopy species are likely to be far away in the tops of trees, but the white letter hair streak, for example, does have distinctive spiralling flight when fighting off or fighting other males, and so that's something to look out for. The orange tip, as the name suggests, the male has orange tips, but is quite distinctive with the underside, which is sort of acts as camouflage, and that's helped distinguishes it from some of the other white butterflies. It lays eggs on garlic mustard, honesty, and cuckoo flower, and so in early summer you can see, or spring you can find the little orange eggs on garlic mustard in a sunny spot. It's one of the first butterflies to emerge in the spring. The female, though, shown down here, can be confused with the small whites, but again, it's the underside that distinguishes it from the small white, and the undersides are shown here. So there's also the green-veined white, and as the name suggests, you can just about pick these up in flight, but once it lands, they are quite distinctive, these veins on the underside of the wing. These again are associated with some of those similar plants that, like the orange tip, and in sort of damper places. The small white or large white, again, the underside is very different from those other two, but the upper side is similar. But the small white shown on the left here has less extensive grey or black marks at the wingtips, with the coloration only extending slightly along the outer edge, so along here, whereas the large white, the black markings are much darker and stronger, and they extend down the wing edge much further. So that's the thing to look out for. So I would say the small white is more widespread and more common, generally speaking, across London's green spaces. So more likely to see a small white than a large white, but you can pick up these darker markings in flight if you look closely. I mentioned the marble white, quite distinctive, can't be mistaken for anything else. It flies in July, prefers unimproved grassland and wildflower meadows. So where we can provide appropriate habitat, it is one that's spreading within London, which is good news. The caterpillar feeds on red fescue, and it's one that continues to spread north. And that's just a picture of the underside, quite a beautiful butterfly. Speckled wood is one you may be familiar with, as the name suggests, most often seen in woodland areas, particularly where you've got, you might see it in dappled sunlight or partially shaded woodland. The male usually perches in a small pool of sunlight, where it rises rapidly to fight off other insects and other male speckled woods. And the caterpillar feeds on false brome, which is a grass, so it does need a sort of grassland areas within the woods. Well, before we get on to that, yes, I should just mention, with going back to meadow brown. Where's the meadow brown? Yes, I should just mention meadow brown is pretty remarkable. That's Friant Country Park, that flagship site in Brent. In 2018, the butterfly transect there recorded 22 species, but over and the total number of butterflies counted across that transect, which is a weekly walk, was over 3,000 butterflies. But the meadow brown, just that one species, was over 2,000 butterflies on one site. So where you can provide some good habitat and a good amount of habitat, you can get large numbers of butterflies. So we'll just carry on now, back to where we were. Yes, just some more information now and links which you may find useful. We've shown some of the butterflies you're most likely to see. We don't have time to go through all of them, obviously, but you can find more information on our website, where there's a really useful A to Z of butterflies. This is quite a helpful laminated chart that's quite useful, which can be purchased via our shop. It's a Field Studies Council guide, and the illustrations are life size, which is quite useful. And you can see how compare the different sizes. So that's the FSC guide, and then for a full guide book, this one is very good. Butterflies of Britain and Ireland by Jeremy Thomas. And yes, I will share these slides and the links after the presentation via email, so you should be able to get hold of that quite easily. So just a bit more now about recording of butterflies and yeah, how to do that and why. So yeah, why record butterflies? Well, understanding butterfly populations informs our conservation work in terms of how butterfly numbers are increasing or decreasing in their distribution, so that we know where to target conservation work. They're a really good indicator of climate change and other changes, and they're a really good indicator of the health of the environment, so taking nature's pulse. So if butterflies are doing well, that often means many other invertebrates, which are the base of the kind of food chain, if you like, are doing well, and will be supporting other wildlife like birds and bats. And yeah, it's good for us to get out and connected with nature and see what wildlife you can see in your local area. So we have many different volunteers helping to provide data and records from weekly transects, for example, and also the wider countryside butterfly survey that fed into the recent report in 2015 with over 11 million occurrence records. And so that was 80,000 days of effort by recorders per year. And there'll be another State of UK Butterflies report coming out soon. And it's that report that helped understand these UK-wide declines that we're seeing. So, for example, the small tortoiseshell was once considered quite a common widespread butterfly's decline by over 70% in the last 30 years, and the large white by around 30%. So, yes, there's no such thing as a common butterfly anymore, unfortunately. So there are different types of surveys that you can do to help gather that data. So casual recording is just when you're out and about with a notebook, or there's an app if you've got a smartphone. It's an easy way of recording butterflies. Walking a transect is a weekly walk on a particular site between April and September, where data is submitted each year. You can contribute to our national moth recording scheme. If you're interested in moths, we can give you more information about that. There's also the Big Butterfly Count, which is one of the biggest citizen science surveys in the world, each year in the peak butterfly season, kind of towards the end of July. This is the simple ID sheet that is provided, and it's a quick 15-minute count that can be done anywhere in your garden or a park, and you can submit your count on the app or the website, and it gives us a real quick snapshot across the whole country how butterflies are faring, which is really useful, and also feeds into those big reports. So just a bit more about the different recording schemes. So I mentioned the transects. They're part of the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, and they help record abundance, so the number of butterflies each year, and tells us if they are increasing or decreasing. So as an example, this is the transect data for the small tortoiseshell butterfly at Lulworth Lake. And you can see back in 2003, there are over 50 recorded, down to 0 in 2021. That data can be used from different sites, different transect sites all across the country. And that's one of the data sets that allows us to show this UK-wide decline of 79%. So the wider countryside butterfly survey is more of a random sampling approach to allow us to monitor butterflies more at random across the wider countryside, so not just the hotspots where people want to go and see butterflies. The Butterflies for the New Millennium Recording Scheme has many records submitted by volunteers online via the iRecord Butterflies app, and via local county recorders, and they contribute to our understanding of species distribution. And the Big Butterfly Count, which I mentioned, we had over 145,000 counts last year. And the National Moth Recording Scheme contributes to useful data sets that allow us to monitor moth populations as well. So those distribution maps, all those records that I mentioned, help us produce these distribution maps. So on the left, the ringlet there is a good news story, has expanded and increased by 63%. So shown on that map is up to 1999, and then those orange dots that just appeared are the more recent distribution up to 2020. So we can see it's expanding north. The wall, on the other hand, is one that's declined by 77%. So the distribution there shown up to 2014, but literally in the last 5 years, the distribution has changed quite dramatically, moving out to coastal regions. So just a little more detail on the transects. If you're interested in butterflies and you've got a local site where you go and like to see butterflies, then this is the ideal way to record them, and it can be done as a group of volunteers on a rota, for example. It's a weekly walk from April to September, and you follow a fixed route during suitable weather. It's just an example of the route shown there, broken down into different sections. And circum can be compared between years. Count all the butterflies seen in an imaginary 5-meter box as you walk along the route. The data about the site, like the temperature, for example, and the weekly butterfly counts can then be entered online and go straight into our data sets. And that allows us to do those annual population indices, which can be calculated for each species that are present on the site. And you need to build up a few years of data to really see those trends. And so, yes, if that is something you're interested in, we can provide support and advice to help set it up. So I think within Brent, there's only one transect at Friant Country Park, so it'd be great to set up some more transects. Casual recording is more what you see when you're out and about, but it can be done as a monthly site survey, and the iRecord Butterflies app which you can get on a smartphone is a really useful way of doing that. Not only can you record the butterflies that you see as you're walking around, but it's got its own identification guide with lots of images and tips on how to identify butterflies on the app. So yeah, as I mentioned, it's a free app available for Apple and Android devices, and it also finds your location. So it shows what's flying in your area at that time, which is pretty useful as well, and you can record anywhere. And that is just a shot of the identification kind of tips and images and information that you get on the app. So yes, you can use that app or a notebook to do a simple butterfly survey. Perhaps your group or you don't have time to do a weekly butterfly transect. So you can do some casual recording where you walk around your chosen green space, ideally monthly from mid-April to mid-August. The weather should be suitable, bright warm weather. You can, if you don't have a smartphone, that's fine. You can take a notebook, recording form, or the smartphone with the iRecord Butterflies app and record whatever butterflies you see, including the number seen. You can then send the records to me, for example, or submit the records via the app or online via Butterflies for the New Millennium. And that will feed into the databases and also the London Records Centre, so that different organisations can view that data. So there's lots more information about what I've spoken about on our website, butterfly-conservation.org. The UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme website is shown there, and that's where the transects are kind of administered and coordinated, and BNM online is shown here, butterflyrecording.org. So I will share these links in a follow-up email. So I hope this has inspired you to find your local green space and make your first visit and start taking records. read up on butterflies, to find out more information, hopefully hone your skills. We've got a butterfly walk coming up actually at Gladstone Park on Saturday morning, and we're hoping to see a number of different species, including small heath, which is a new butterfly that's recently colonised that site. But we'll be doing other events next year and further into the autumn, and so if you're interested in being kept up to date on the different events, then we're providing a regular newsletter, so you can sign up to that newsletter, and I'll make a link available. Somebody's asking if the events are always on a Saturday. No, we will be doing a variety of days for different events, and yes, attending community events as well. And yes, if you're interested in some of the other activities I've mentioned in the project, like the habitat management and the seeding and the planting, and you'd like some site advice, then yeah, let me know. And if you are doing some casual recording or a monthly survey of your local site, then again, it'd be great to just hear from you, and then I can check and see those records that are coming in as they're submitted, which would be fantastic. So yes, I think that brings me to the end of the presentation. So I'll stop sharing, and we'll take some questions, either unmute yourselves or via the chat.